If there's a few jobs and there's a ton of people who are looking for the job, now it's our market now because we have so many people we can pick from. So now how do you stand out in a market like that, which I think is universal, whether you're talking about entertainment or, insurance or wherever. How do you stand out? How do you get to that 11?
Yes.
Right? So.
Yes, and that's what we're here to demystify and talk about today. And to your point, it can cross all different industries. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode 6 of the Fisher Search Group podcast. I'm very excited to be joined by my good friend and colleague, Vince Villanueva. Welcome, Vince, to the program. So actually, thanks. So Vince and I we've known each other for now 30 years, actually. When I was a freshman at UCLA, I think you were a sophomore. We met in marching band, went on countless trips together. And then now we're catching up 30 years later, and we're actually both in an interviewing capacity. So I thought it'd be really great to bring him on the program. And we came up with the topic. Actually, you came up with some great titles. We have on a scale of 1 to 10, getting to 11. And then another theme we're going to talk about is vulnerability, bringing your authentic self to the interview. So welcome, Vince.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So let me give a quick bio to our audience listening so they know a little bit more about you. So as I mentioned, we met 30 years ago when I was at UCLA, but Vince actually started his entertainment career 30 years ago as well, and has since made his mark in the music industry, having worked for studios like DreamWorks, Paramount, Universal, and Disney on TV shows like Keeping Up with the Kardashians, The Real World, and American Idol. As well as such films, Anchorman, Trolls, and the Shrek franchise, he's become the go-to guy for music clearance. He is currently at Netflix, where he oversees music clearance for all of their animated films and TV shows. So once again, today we're talking about on a scale of 1 to 10, getting to 11. And I think vulnerability in interviews has gotten some mixed reviews. There's like, should I do it? Should I not do it? Should I stick to the script? Should I give my interview answers? But when I met with you, probably like about a month or so ago, we got on the topic of interviews, and it was very interesting to me to hear your side of the conversation about being vulnerable and how that could play in your favor if it's done right. So no better to break it down than my boy Vince. And so I really appreciate you joining us. I would love to throw it over to you just for a quick intro and share what you've been up to.
Yeah, thanks for having me again. My name is Vince. Currently, I'm at Netflix Studios, and I'm working in the music department, and I do the interviews for our music team. I don't know how I've done countless interviews, and definitely being on the other side of it, I've learned a lot of things, what works, what doesn't work, and that's how we got into the topic of, vulnerability and what cards do you show, don't you show, and when do you show them, and when don't you show them. There's a lot of different aspects to that I've learned doing interviews. So I think that just kind of spawned this whole conversation about what does work and what I've seen. And so I'm definitely here to help shed some light on what I've seen.
That's great. And so we're really here today to share all this information with our respective audiences. I'm in executive search. Vince is in music clearance. We come together over our love for music and actually theater. We actually done some theater together. I've conducted some shows that you were in. That was a long time ago. But really interviewing and selling yourself and talking about yourself, for some people, it's uncomfortable. So we're really here to help our respective audiences today kind of demystify some of this and give you some answers and pointers and tips and things that I hope you can use and will be very impactful for your career. So if you enjoy this, please subscribe to this channel, like it. You can comment below, add to the conversation, but we're going to jump right in. And before we jump to our main topic about vulnerability in the interviews, anything you're seeing in terms of market trends, on the entertainment side? I know there's been some recent changes at the turn of the year, but some things you'd like to share.
Yeah, currently, the state of entertainment, it's struggling right now. There's not as many productions going on right now. And that's a combination of things. There was, coming back from the pandemic, there were writer strikes and actor strikes. And I don't think the rubber band came back to its original shape that they thought it would. So I think the trend right now is you had all these productions going on, and now you don't have as many. So what that does is potentially increases the amount of people looking for work, but decreases the amount of work that's available. So now you have this funnel that's created. So if there's a job opening and one person in that funnel gets it, everyone who's in the funnel just kind of like shifts slightly. It's not like a huge open thing where everyone's working. Now, we're hopefully trying to get more productions going. And I don't know the reason because I'm not in development and acquisitions and green lighting anything. I just work on the projects when they green light them. But the trend I'm seeing right now is that it's not as good right now in entertainment specifically.
Right.
But there have been other times like this, like in I think 2008, 2009, when like the reality show buzz kind of went full steam ahead. That's not happening this time. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. The other thing too is that there are so many more streamers than there were back in 2008. Back then you had cable companies and network stations. So there was kind of a limited amount of shows that you can have, but with streamers, you have Hulu, Apple, Disney, Netflix, all these, and they need content. So the difference is on a streamer, you don't have an 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. slot that you need to fill because there's no time slots, right? You can kind of
Right.
release as the shows are done. So
Right.
it's a different model, but hopefully that will kind of pick up some of the slack that's happening with the networks and stuff. So now it's a matter of if there's a few jobs and there's a ton of people who are looking for the job, now it's our market now because we have so many people we can pick from. So now how
Yep.
do you stand out
Yep.
in a market like that, which I think is universal, whether you're talking about entertainment or, you know, insurance or wherever? How do you stand out? How do you get to that 11,
Yes.
right? So
Yes, and that's what we're here to demystify and talk about today. And to your point, it can cross all different industries. We place within medical device sales, marketing, and clinical. You're in entertainment, but speaking about yourself, your background, your work history, and engaging with your interviewer is all the same wherever you go. I think, and we'll get into it, but you shared a couple little tidbits, some nuances about the culture at Netflix, which I thought was amazing and awesome, and how you interview. So just to set the stage, who are the types of people? What levels are these roles that you're interviewing for?
so the ones that I was interviewing for, they would probably be manager and below. So manager, coordinator, associate, assistant.
And then, are you interviewing for anything specifically? Like I know you said music clearance. So, are you assessing technical fit, or do you look at the resume and you're like, oh, they worked there, so that sort of speaks for itself? Or kind of what when you have your slot, what are you looking for?
I think this is the part where we kind of go behind the curtain a little bit. So the way that we do interviews at Netflix, it's a panel, right? So there's,
Mm,
let's say, 4 or 5 people on a panel. And that doesn't mean like there's 4 or 5 people interviewing one person at the same time. They're in half-hour slots.
I see.
So if there's 5 different people, each one of us will have a different area that we're focusing on. So one will
Got it.
be technical, one will be experience, one will be culture. So we each have our own thing. I was one looking for what's called a culture fit. So Netflix is known for having this culture of feedback and transparency, and it's all in their memo, and that plays into some of the things that we had talked about
Hmm.
when we're doing the interview process. So my thing was to make sure that I test, do they know what the culture is? Are they aware of what their culture fit would be? And are the two intersecting?
Hmm.
And so I think it does kind of apply universally, right? It's like, what are the requirements of the job? What is your experience? And are they intersecting somewhere? So it's the same thing. I just had to look at it from a cultural perspective.
Okay. This is
Yeah.
great. This is an awesome place to start. So let's just dive into our main topic. And for those just joining, this is episode 6 of the Fisher Search Group podcast. We're talking about, on a scale of 1 to 10, how to get to an 11 with my good friend and colleague, Vince Villanueva. I've known him 30 years. We went to UCLA together. And here we are 30 years later, looking to help people in our respective communities. So diving into the interview process, vulnerability. This is something which came up when we met much when obviously, people want to share how they are a fit for the role through accomplishments and all this prep material. But take me through maybe an opening question, or how are you setting the scene for people so you can assess them through them, making them comfortable to even be vulnerable?
Yeah. So whenever people interview, right, there's nerves. If it means something to you, you're going to be nervous, right? So for me, as the interviewer, I try and diffuse that as quickly as possible. So in music, I ask them, "What was your first concert and where was it?"
Mm,
And it's an answer that you don't have to think about. I mean, you think about it, but it's not a trick question. It's just me trying to get to know you and to get you used to speaking. And it's something you should know. And so what I've seen so many times is I ask that question and you see
mm,
people go, okay, they exhale and they like relax. And because
yeah.
they're able to say, mine was Gloria Stefan and Miami Sound Machine in Selland Arena in Fresno, California, which is the truth.
Yeah.
But, it gets people to start talking. And so in the interview, being vulnerable starts small, right? It starts there, right? Because now I'm getting a little insight into who you are. Because if you said Garth Brooks, oh, maybe they're country fans. Oh, it was Metallica. Maybe they're rock fans. It just
Hmm.
kind of gets the knowing the person to start small. So that's where the vulnerability can start because by the end, and you'll see, we need to figure out, are they a fit? Are they a culture fit? When it comes to vulnerability, though, the question is, how vulnerable do I need to be? And so what I
Great
found is
question.
the most successful candidates are the ones that are able to be very honest in their interview. And it sounds weird, but there are a lot of times people will get asked a question and they've rehearsed it in their head and or they do like the pageant answer, right? So if you were to say, name a time that you turned a weakness into strength, and the answer will be, let me repeat the question. A time that I was weak and it became a strength would be when, and it sounds so rehearsed. And so for me, when it comes to a high pressure situation like we deal with here, I don't know if that would be the right fit. But if you have somebody who gets asked that question, right? And they say, okay, hold on, let me think. I would say, so that space that I took in my
Mm,
head seems like it was a minute long. But what the person on the other end hears, it was just me thinking, and it was only like 3 seconds. So it's the vulnerability comes when you're able to just be authentically yourself. And
mm,
that sometimes means admitting like, sorry, I'm really nervous right now, but hold on. I would say, so doing that is showing I'm vulnerable and I'm able to do it. Now it's this weird balance because you want to be able to sell yourself like I'm the person for the job, but the interview isn't the only thing, right? There's experience, there's your resume, there's how you communicate. There's so many things that come into play that you have to figure out where and when to use that vulnerability and make it authentic. And if you could do that, for me, those are the people that we keep sending through in the interview process.
yeah, thank you for that. And I hope everyone goes back to it was right around 13 minutes and listens to this because it is okay to be vulnerable. I know some people are nervous that they're going to reveal too much, and maybe that too much that they revealed is the tipping point to not getting the job or getting passed up because maybe they revealed something too personal. But I really like what you said about taking that pause and really reflecting. And it felt like a minute, but maybe it was 3 or 4 seconds. And you're like, yeah, you know what? There was one time when dot 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 and it's maybe it was a humbling experience, maybe it was a learning experience. Real quick, jumping back, my first concert, I'm pretty sure it was Madonna at the sports arena, which is now where LAFC plays. It's now that BMO field or stadium,
Yeah, yeah,
with my dad, and I think it was like 6th or 7th grade, and it was unbelievable. It was really
yeah,
great.
yeah. It's an easy question, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Easy little icebreaker to just sort of ease into the interview. And then, sure, you'll start to get into some questions. What happens though when you feel like you're getting an interview answer or a superficial answer? How are you uncovering more of the truth?
Yeah, no, it happens quite frequently. One of the questions that I ask is why Netflix?
Mm,
And so many times, see that long pause? It seemed like forever, but it wasn't.
okay.
But I asked why Netflix, and the answers we usually get are ones that, oh my gosh, I love Netflix. I've had Netflix since, like for 10 years. I love it. I absolutely love it. It's great. We get that all the time. So what I do is I will say, Perfect. What else?
Mm.
And they'll say, definitely, they have so many great programs and they program from around the world. And, and these are all factual. Like, I get
Yep.
it.
Yep.
But if you're staying on factual, right? I want more. And this is where the vulnerability part comes in. So if I'm not getting it, I will say, interesting. What else?
Mm.
And you keep prodding that way.
Second
And
prompt.
yeah. And so what happens is if you can find somebody who authentically can just exhale and say their reason why, and you feel it is an authentic and vulnerable answer, that's the person you want and working for you. I do the same thing with music. Why music? And everyone
Mm.
says, I love music. I grew up with music. It was always playing in the house. We get that all the time. And so you go deeper and deeper and deeper to see how far you can keep pushing it. Because once people get to the root of why they're passionate about something, then you're going to get the real answer. Everything else is just kind of fluff to kind of like, let me just answer this question because I only have X amount of time left in this interview, and then we'll go to the next one. But if you can actually answer it, and I have my reasons why I went into music and why I want to go for Netflix, and it doesn't have to match mine, but it just has to be a very real answer.
So you're bringing us to now the second key point in the vulnerability piece, and that is getting to the point where you're digging and digging and unlocking the passion that they have for the genre or for the industry. I do have to hand it to you that you keep digging, because I'll get recruiters on my team who, like they'll take the answer and great, and then they'll move on. And I'm like, wait. Did you get did you get to the truth? Did you find out? Did you dig? Did you dig? And of course, we train them to do that. But I think for some interviewers, it's uncomfortable to keep pushing and pushing and pushing. But there's a method to the line of questioning, and we always say we're trying to be an investigative reporter. We're trying to get to the truth. We're trying to really dig so that when we get those answers, we will confirm that there is a good match. And
Mhm.
in this instance, you're telling us you're trying to unlock the passion and the why someone wants to do something. And sometimes it's not always easily articulated by the candidate, but this really helps for you to uncover who they really are. Will they be a fit in this department?
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's pretty natural when you're interviewing where you got dressed up, you're ready, you've prepped for this, and they're asking questions. Like I said, you want to get the question, answer it, and keep moving.
Correct.
So when I
Typical
do,
MO.
yeah,
Get the
when I
question,
do,
answer it, keep going. Yep.
yeah, I do the next part where I'm like, what else, right? And keep digging and digging and digging. Now all that prep that you did is kind of put to the side for a second because now I'm trying to get who the real you is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's uncomfortable for some people. And it's really uncomfortable when I say, what else? And I just sit there and it's
And you're
silent.
okay sitting there and you're
I'm
just
I'm
waiting.
fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm fine. I know how it is to be on the other side. But then the amount of synapses that are happening in their brain, like, do I tell him the reason why is, when my mom was ill and she just wanted to get away for an hour and watch a TV show, and Netflix was the place that was able
Mm,
to give her all those shows? Do I
mm,
tell them that? That's where you question the vulnerability. How authentic and vulnerable do I need to be? I always lean towards go for it because that's your authentic and real self. And if that's who you're presenting and you get the job, it's a great match. But if you present something fake or not really you and you get the job, it might not be the best match. It could match in certain ways. We usually say we're not looking for a hand that fits like a mitten. We want it to fit like a custom leather glove. So a
that's
mitten can
big.
cover it, right? And
Yep.
it'll do,
Yep.
do the job. But that custom leather glove is a way better fit and it'll
Good
work on.
analogy.
So that's why we kind of keep digging.
Yep. Yeah. I love that. Thank you for sharing. And really the kind of to sum this all up, I am going to encourage you. Vince is telling you lean into the vulnerability. It's going to feel a little uncomfortable and it's going to be revealing, and you'll ease into it, but having a good interviewer like yourself, I think, helps. Because if you can get that out of your interviewee, then you can really see who they really are, and then you can make that recommendation, either for or against. And if it is against, then maybe you're saving someone from being in a culture that they're really not meant to be in. So, and we always take it personally, right? But it just means that something else is meant to be out there that's better, and it's going to come along. So,
Yeah. I want to add something real quick to that is, currently I'm at Netflix, right? And it seems great, and it is. But I got in after the third try because it wasn't the perfect fit for me the first two times.
interesting.
But just
Wow.
because, you go through the interview, I went through the whole process and got to the end, and it wasn't me.
Hmm.
And so even if you get all the way to the end and it's not a fit, that's not the end of the road for this. Like,
Yep.
I've done it twice, and then the third time is when it finally clicked.
That's
So just to add to what you were saying.
Yeah, it's an amazing story of resilience. We take people through the interview process every week, and there's only one finalist. So
Mhm.
we are also a part of the conversation when they don't get it. What you're talking about is it's just a testament to resilience, it's to positivity, and just to keep going. And if it's not a fit now, it's not a no. I've heard it's just a not now. But when the
Not right now.
opportunity is meant to happen, it will come together. So for those of you just joining us, Vince Villanueva, one of my dear friends from UCLA. Thank you for joining on episode 6 of the Fisher Search Group podcast. If you've enjoyed what you've heard, please subscribe to get more content just like this. Like it, and comment below if you have any feedback or thoughts on vulnerability in interviews. You talked earlier about a culture of feedback, right? I think you talked about a culture of feedback. So, can you talk to me about this one specific interview you had regarding bringing feedback into the interview, if you don't mind? I thought that was very, very interesting.
Absolutely. I was doing an interview, and it wasn't going as well. The responses
Mm.
I was getting, they were very planned, very two sentences, and it just seemed like they rehearsed everything, right? And I kept trying other things to see if they can get into who the root of this person was, and it just wasn't working.
So
So
you were inviting the vulnerability, you were probing, you were asking, you were digging, you were doing what you do, and you were still not getting anything.
yeah, and so
Fair.
one thing that you, as an interviewer or interviewee, actually, is that you kind of have to roll with the punches. And so I decided I'm going to ask the person a question. I said, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being horrible and 10 being absolutely amazing, what would you give this interview? And almost as soon as I finished that question, the person replied, 10.
10.
And I said, and I was taken back, like no pause, no break, no like, let me think about it. And I felt like that was it was an opportunity for me to give another chance to be vulnerable, for her to
That's
say,
interesting.
I've done better in interviews. I would say I'm a this, but without hesitation, it was a 10. We have a culture of feedback here at Netflix. So I said, well, I'm going to give you some actual feedback.
Let me give you
You
some
know,
quick feedback on your
yeah,
answer.
quick feedback. And so it was almost another part of the interview because now it's how do you handle feedback? Are you defensive? Are you not? Or do you take it? Right. And
Good point.
I said, I don't, I don't agree that it's a 10. And the thing is, the look on this person's face wasn't like, really? It was more just like, so I was like, I cannot get a read on this person. And I said, yeah, let's continue on, but I would just encourage you, um, to be more vulnerable and kind of let us in on why you're answering the way you're answering. And she
Very
said, okay,
fair.
okay, great, yeah. So we tried to get through the interview, and it just didn't go well. I don't know if it was a bad day or what, but after our interviews, then we give our written feedback and we submit it into a system. And you suggest should they move on or not. And I said, no, this is not a culture fit, right? That's what I'm looking
Sure.
for. It's
Yep.
not a fit, definitely not. And so I thought, you know, okay, hopefully other people experience this as well. So when you add all those up, then it's not a fit. And then I come to find out, so we're going to make this person an offer. And
Wow.
I was blown away. I'm like, what? Okay. Did you? were you able to read my feedback? Because I,
Right.
and they said, yeah, we took into consideration everything, but we really feel like
Mm.
they would be able to be trained up. And I said, okay, all right, and they got hired.
That's really
So,
interesting. I just want to unpack a couple things here, Vince, because this
mhm.
is, like every time we have a guest on, you're sharing nuggets that we never hear anywhere else. And so I've never heard of like, hey, how do you, on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you think this interview is going? Like it should even come to that. But then to find out that you gave the thumbs down on the, Vince's feedback, and then they're still going to move forward. It's very interesting. I would imagine that you having to say that in an interview, it does not happen often, right?
It's the only time I've ever done that.
Only time, and you've probably done hundreds.
I did, yeah. I've done over 100, yeah. And I always see, like, if somebody asked me that, I would see that as a way to stand out. And what I would say is, on a scale of 1 to 10, ask the question, how do you think this interview is going? I would say, you know what? I'm going to say 7.37. Right. Because now you're like, wait, what does he mean? How did he get the 0.37?
Right.
Where's it
What's your
coming from?
rubric? How are you
Yeah.
calculating that?
I would say, well, I have room to improve, but I feel like the first part, I dressed the part, and I feel like we're kind of connecting, but we can connect more. And I hope in the next 15 minutes we'll be able to do that. And I feel like that is me going out on a limb, taking a risk,
Mm-hmm.
and just going for it in the interview. And that's kind of
Yeah.
like my personality. So you have to kind of show that in the interview.
Yeah, but everyone watching, Vince is he's very self-aware. Like you've always been you're very aware, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this requires that your interviewee has that self-awareness, and I would think most people do, but then there's like I don't know if it was a manager role or it's kind of maybe dependent on what kind of contribution the person would make, but yeah, the self-awareness I think is really big. We are coming up on our 30-minute mark, and I want to round out with a last question, which I think is a surprise question to some people, but I would love for you to share it and give us some insight into this question.
Yeah. Excuse me. So the first question I asked in the interview was, what's your first concert, right?
Yep. Opportunity to be vulnerable.
Correct. We
Share.
get all the way to the
Yep.
end, right? Now we've been
Yep.
speaking for half an hour. And the last question I ask is, what is one question you didn't want me to ask today?
Mm.
And so what happens is people get a little tripped up by it.
Yep.
Some people say, do you mean what's a question that you asked me that you were hoping you didn't ask me, or one that you didn't ask? And I said, it's up to you. What's one question you didn't want me to ask you today? And that's the kind of like the big tell for me, because I've had so many great answers. I've had a lot of bad ones, but one person, they stopped, they paused, they said, hold on, let me think for a second. And I love that. I love the fact that they took that space and just
Mm-hmm.
said, let me think, right? They didn't just say, oh, because then you end up like the pageant girl who about the maps question, the viral video where she like talks about the maps and she just kind of rambles, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So this
Mm-hmm.
person said, hold on one second, let me think, let me think. Oh yeah. And then they told me the answer. And it was, I was hoping that you didn't ask me if I had seen Stranger Things. And I said, fair enough. And that was it.
Right.
I didn't ask him like, did you see Stranger Things? I just,
Right. Right.
so there's questions like that. And some of them will say, oh, I was hoping you weren't going to ask me about my gap in my resume. And I'm like, oh, I think your experience of what you've done since then, kind of makes up for it. Or we all have things going on, and I'm just here to see if you're a culture fit, as opposed to like the resume fit. You've already passed that part with the recruiters. So
I
yeah,
love
there's,
that.
there's some interesting answers, but it does take people like aback a little bit.
Yep. So in closing, to kind of wrap everything up, we have been talking about vulnerability in interviews. leaning into it, talking about things that maybe you're a little bit uncomfortable about. And this is all under the caption of, on a scale of 1 to 10, how to take your interview to an 11, with my good friend and colleague, Vince Villanueva, who I met 30 years ago at UCLA. We're recommending the vulnerability angle, not just the facts. You're talking about facts, and then facts, and then facts. Sure, that sounds great. But when you layer in, you splash in some vulnerability in there into who you really are, even if it's not always pretty and perfect. It sounds like you really appreciate that, and you respect it, and it carries your vote, potentially into endorsing them to the next round.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So thank you so much for sharing all this good stuff today. A little insight into the interview process at Netflix. I'm getting into Cobra Kai. I'm late to the game. I just finished season 3, and I have like 35 more episodes to go to get caught up. So pretty awesome, good stuff. I was really impressed the foray into the sports side of things this last year. Yeah, amazing. So love what you're doing over there. I can't wait to catch up with you outside of these discussions in the future. Once again, episode 6, Fisher Search Group podcast with my good friend Vince Villanueva. Please consider subscribing, liking, and commenting below if you enjoy this content, and we will continue to provide lots of wonderful information for our respective communities. Vince, thank you. Any last words?
I won't ask you if you've watched Stranger Things.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. All
All
right,
right.
take care.
All right. Bye.
Bye.